to Burgert, 3 blocks away, our office on Howard and 4th. And I run the mobile group at Globant. I didn't put a slide with my picture because I thought I might as well share with you what I do. I started a mobile consulting company in 2008 to do mobile games and mobile apps. We became very popular in the Bay Area, and in 2011 Globant acquired my company, and now I run the mobile practice at Globant. So Globant is much larger than what I was a couple years back.
2,700 employees?
2,700 employees.
Not all here?
No. That's 20 offices. So throughout the Americas. We have more or less 16 offices in Latin America, 3 in the US, and 1 in the UK.
Where's the headquarters?
So in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and then here San Francisco is our US headquarters.
Okay.
I would say 95% of our employees are in Latin America, and just 5% in the US. New York, San Francisco, and then Austin, Texas.
So if we have questions about the Latin American market, like Wachovia or some of the bigger platforms on mobile, and are you going to cover any of that in the Latin American market?
So no, it won't be targeted to Latin America.
Well, I know the slides aren't. I'm just curious.
But yeah, you can ping me with.
Okay, I'm going to think some questions.
Definitely, ping me with any questions you might have. So this Nextive was the company that Globant acquired, the one I started. And I was telling someone that we've got these studios, which are our business units. So I run the mobile practice. But different practices have different areas of focus. In gaming, what we do is primarily development, engineering, and the experience overall. I won't bore you with the commercials. These are some of the names that we help with, just to build some credibility. We do stuff for Zynga, Rockstar, YetiZen. So some of these might be mobile games, some might be infrastructure projects, other web properties. So these are the topics that I was planning on sharing with you guys. And feel free to ask any questions, because we can tailor the conversation to any area that might be interesting. Chatting a bit about the market, why it's important to understand the different alternatives to create apps. Then looking at the different alternatives and pros and cons of each. And then finally talking about other frameworks different from gaming specific alternatives. And this might last 20 minutes more or less. As we all know, it's quite diverse. There are many platforms out there, and then Android also deriving a lot of traction. Although monetization on Android is not as high as iOS, it becomes part of the equation when people want to publish a new product. You go out and say, where should I publish my product? Should I go iPhone first? Should I go Android? Typically, nowadays, we continue to see an iOS first strategy, but this year we started to see companies that are Android only as a niche in itself, saying, I create only Android games, and that's my differentiation versus someone who's doing the same on iOS.
And in Latin America, the iOS is very slim. Android is minimal.
In emerging economies, Android has more penetration than iOS. Devices have a lower price point, and so people buy them in greater quantities than the US. In developed markets, iOS has been leading. So, for example, today, now at 1Q 2013, Android, 75, 80%, which is much higher than what we saw a couple of years ago. Here, 75. So this is the growth, 1 year growth, currently 75. The platform that is growing the most is Windows Phone, albeit from a very small base. Have you had a Windows Phone? Have you seen a Windows Phone? Yeah? Great, okay. So there are some games that are published on Windows Phone. Microsoft will pay you for that. So if you have a game and you want to port it there, call Microsoft. They will definitely pay you to port the game and have it on their platform. BlackBerry, nothing going on there. Linux, nothing going on, although now there's some chatter around new phones with Linux. So that's why primarily the two platforms that make sense nowadays continue to be Android and iOS. Now when we look at Android, although the monetization might not be there, you do have a user base. So for example, when you're pitching VCs or you want to grow your, it's good to have an Android SKU, which will give you a lot of users and feedback. So if you take the Android different versions, you'll see that around half are in the 4th version, and then you've also got the legacy 3rd on 2.3 gingerbread. These are shrinking fast. You know, they were released in 2011, and these are the old HTC phones where people don't even update, or you cannot update the operating system version. The newer Samsung phones, you will hop onto the update cycle, and therefore folks update it regularly. Remember that in Android also, the manufacturer defines when you can update, because they do edits to the operating system. And so Samsung will allow, let's say you have a Samsung Galaxy S4, they will allow for the update whenever they decide. So primarily this is what people target on Android. All of this means there are different platforms, and when you look at Android, there are different even versions that you need to target. Yeah.
So when manufacturers decide to update, right? So do they kind of like advance notice as far as when it's going to happen?
No, they just allow. Typically, in the case of Samsung, which is one of the largest Android manufacturers, you sync up your phone, and eventually you get a notification with a new version of our operating system. But it might be not changing from 4 to 5. You'll get increments of, and you just upload it. The good thing about Samsung is over the air. Probably Wi-Fi can do it. I carry all the different phones. The one that I like is the Galaxy Note 2. I don't know if you've seen it. The phablet, very popular in Asia, very popular, and I started toying with it, and excellent performance, and it has this automatic update over the air on everything. No need to sync up the cable. So then we talked a bit about the platforms. Why do people use cross-development platforms? We'll talk a bit more in gaming and then enterprise, but it's because you want to hit as many platforms as possible. If you have a team doing an iOS app and then you want to create an Android version and you're doing native development, you need to replicate that team, more or less. There might be some benefits, but overall, you have 2 or 3 engineers doing a product, and you want to push it native onto the Android platform, you need 2 or 3 engineers to look at that. And if it's Android and you're trying to target as big of a number of devices as possible, you have different resolutions, different screen sizes, you need to test, and so it becomes more onerous, also the Android development front rather than iOS. Oh, I didn't turn on the mic. Can you hear me correctly, guys?
I hear you fine. Yeah.
Well, we'll try with the mic and we'll see. Let's see how this works. A little bit better? Okay. I think they're also recording a little bit better. If there is not a multi-platform strategy, then cross-platform frameworks are not that important. Let's say some of these companies are saying, I want to do Android only. Well, just go native in Android and you'll get the best performance you can extract and squeeze out of that one platform. So that's the number one reason why folks use cross-platform development frameworks. The number one reason why folks cease to use the cross-platform development framework is because of performance. You also sacrifice some user experience and some performance when you start selecting platforms, because you're not maximizing and squeezing the most value out of that one platform that you're using. A good example is the Facebook app. You know, they started native, then they went to a hybrid approach. I don't know if you remember JavaScript, HTML5. Folks were not that happy. It didn't perform as expected. I have some screenshots of the app not rendering the HTML as they wanted, you know, screwing up the UI. They went back to native. And we were chatting before this about the new bubble heads and chatting, you know, extracting the most value natively out of the platform. LinkedIn also is a good example. They were native, they went hybrid, and they went back.
But I guess if you have 100 engineers per team, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Correct. But if you're an indie developer and you have one or two guys and you are doing coding, and you want a cross-platform approach, then some of these things make sense. So Unity, I'll go through more or less 5 or 6. And what's important here is just to consider these alternatives. There's no right or wrong answer on which one to use and for what. But if you have them and if you keep them in mind, that's great. That's a good step. So Unity, very well known. And I think Unity also participates here at YetiZen and provides info. What's important here is that you can do 2D and 3D games, primarily. You can use C# to continue to modify the game, so you use their tool to create the content and then continue to modify that with code. The price point is kind of expensive for indie guys. For larger companies, it's fine, it's another license. And it's good for starting a game from scratch. If you already have mobile properties or web properties and you want to push them to Unity, well, there won't be a parity in between what you've done before and the new property. But when you're starting something from scratch, it might be a good choice to consider. What's good also about Unity is that constantly they push out updates on their products. So you get the new features. When Apple releases AirPlay, to connect the device with a TV, with an Apple TV, Unity also included an API call for that. So even from Unity, you can link to AirPlay without going back to the code and editing the code. If you were to go back to the code, that means that you have a Unity designer, developer, and then once you have the code, you need an Objective-C gal to edit the code and connect with AirPlay. As more features are published on Unity, the cheaper it is to create a product here. And also, of course, that connects with Android. And they also take care of the abstraction level. Let's say Android doesn't have an AirPlay feature. If you use AirPlay on your Unity build, it doesn't matter, Android will not pick it up. The game will continue to perform. Marmalade. Who has heard of Marmalade here? 1, 2, yeah. So not many. Unity, of course, majority have heard. Marmalade is another, I would say, top framework to consider for game development. Limited. No, actually, you could do 3D as well. 2D and 3D. It's primarily C++ as a platform. And the thing is, the technology approach, you need to be comfortable, or your team needs to be comfortable with C++. More of a, it's not a high-level language. You need to be technically willing to write a game on C++. The good thing is that it can be ported, when you do a game in C++, you can port it to different platforms. It's a good foundation. Some of well-known games are using Marmalade. EA uses Marmalade, a version of Marmalade, for some of their games as well, so it's well established as a framework. It's not as expensive to start off, depending on what features you want to pick. And that's why I listed second as another consideration when doing a game. And also, in this case, allows for porting an existing game. Let's say you have a game in C++ and you want to quickly test it out for mobile. You can take the C++ code, plug it on Marmalade, and see how it performs. So it's a good way to quickly have a proof of concept and see how it performs. And you can push it to native Mac, for example, Windows, different platforms. So it's a quick way to test out if your current C++ game can run. They also have another version called Juice, Marmalade Juice, that is a limited version that performs has fewer features than the full Marmalade version. Monogame, how many have heard of this? Okay, this is also a popular one for the Microsoft environment. So all of the, let's say, .NET and Microsoft type engineers will probably lean towards this. So here you connect the monogame framework with Xamarin, which is another cross-platform development tool, and you can create a game in XNA or in Microsoft Technologies and push to iOS. So this comes in handy when you have a game written in .NET or you have content from .NET. You can use There's also the free version is simple to also try it out and make tests to see if it works out on iOS. Typically when you do these tests and then you take code, you compile it for a new platform, the aspect ratio of the game doesn't work, the resolution doesn't work, so there's more UI work that needs to happen. But it's a good check on performance, on usability, just to start out. XNA, do you know what XNA is? So that is being sunset by Microsoft, and it's what's being used to code for Xbox and games. So that is also something to keep in mind. Meaning that it won't have a multi-year lifetime if you code in XNA for a month. Yeah.
So no Windows Phone support?
This has Windows Phone support, yeah.
Oh.
Yes. So I should have put Windows Phone here, but Windows Phone and Windows 8. Corona. Yes, have you heard of Corona? So Corona is good at marketing, and they started a while ago, so people know about Corona. It had a huge con initially in that you needed to write in Lua, which is a different coding language where it's not easy to find engineers that have learned Lua, that want to do Lua based on their alternatives. They can write in a more demanded language and make money. So that was a huge drawback. But then they did an HTML5 version where you could write in HTML and also use the framework. Simple games, 2D games, scroll side, running games. That's the extent of where Corona is typically used. License cost is between 500 and 2,500. So primarily you use this if you want to have, for example, an Android-based game and push on to the Amazon store and also the Nook store. That is primarily the use case for using Corona. And I think that's what they have specialized in. You know how different companies want to create their own niche so they become available. So if you want to create a game, cross-platform, that is an Android, but uses the APIs of Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Nook, then this could be a good framework. Also, the order in which we put all these frameworks is more or less representative of how important we believe they are. I think this is the last one. No, we have Game Maker as well. Cocos 2D. It started as an iOS-only framework, open source framework. I don't know if you've heard of Cocos 2D, yeah? And for example, we did Farmville on iOS, my company, and iOS, iPhone, and iPad. And we used Cocos 2D as a framework for that product, and also other resource management games. Folks in Asia, specifically China, took Cocos 2D, open source version, and did a Cocos 2D X version, which now supports all of these platforms. And so you have some well-known games which are isometric 2D. These are not 3D games. Isometric view that have used Cocos 2D X. Yeah, 2.5D, isometric view, different names for the same concept. And it's in C++ as well. So technically, it is more demanding. You need to find gals that want to do C++ code for the game. The documentation is not that great for the Cocos 2DX. The majority of the supporters of this open source framework are in China. And so if you read Mandarin, then you might find a lot of documentation. For English speaking, there's less documentation.
So are there more Asian games with Cocos 2D?
There might be. There might be. I'm not proficient in Asian languages, so I wasn't able to find much. But the documentation is not that complete relative to the other frameworks.
There are many on iOS, right? So
this one supports all the Cocos.
Initially it started on.
It started on iOS.
Yeah, because in Asia it's kind of funny. Android is pretty dominant.
Yes. Yes.
An Asian developer made.
But if once you have an open source framework like Cocos 2D, you just take that code, you put a new name onto it, you branch it out, and you create a new framework. Here it is, Cocos 2D X. It's a similar logo, and so But the good thing is that now it supports Android, Windows Phone, BlackBerry, all that. So, I mean, cancel this code. Great. And then Game Maker. Game Maker, I don't want to say it's an amateur type product, but it's a very simple product. Some might even define it, even with Game Salad, some might define it as an RAD tool, Rapid Application Development, where a game designer or a non-technical individual creates a prototype and then uses that to showcase the product, the game. So share it with people. So it's very simple. It's a very simple tool. You can create a game out of it. And so this might be a good start if you have the time to create a game without being top of the line and without using all of the features of the platform. You could create a cross-platform game for $500 and the time span. So Game Maker Studio. This is also a good tool. You know, when sometimes brands want to create a promotional game that might be only valid for an event or for a limited period of time, low-hanging fruit, cheap game, this could be a good tool to use for those instances where, you know, it's kind of the 80-20 rule for creating games. So does this make sense in terms of the different alternatives?
Are those all the frameworks?
So these are the frameworks that
What about, what's your thoughts on HTML5